Well, welcome everyone to the Live Better Connected podcast. This is the fifth in our series. And as many of you are aware of the new people joining, this is about enlightening the use of mobile and mobile connectivity in our daily lives. Now, today I am super excited because with me today we have Penny Walster from The Big Issue. And many of you will know The Big Issue because of Big Issue Sellers. But Penny, for those who don't know, I wondered if you could introduce yourself and also The Big Issue and everything that it does.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, The Big Issue is a magazine that is sold across the UK. The magazine itself has been going since 1991. And the concept of the magazine side of what The Big Issue does is that it provides a legitimate income for people who are struggling in poverty or on the margins of society, for them to engage with their local community, but also legitimately earn money. So vendors will buy the magazine from us for £2 and then they will sell it to members of the public for £4. The Big Issue itself, as a group, we have a remit to try and help people out of poverty through enterprise. So the Big Issue group is much wider than the magazine. We now have Big Issue Invest, who do ethical loans and investments that support other charities and business startups. And we also have our Big Issue Recruit arm, which again helps people into employment and offers a really good wraparound service for people that are sort of looking to move into employment but might need a little bit more help around that. So the whole ethos of what the Big Issue is about helping people out of poverty into kind of something that's more sustainable and longer term. So yeah, my role in it is I work with our frontline teams and I am the service development director. So I work with our frontline staff and try and come up with new ways that we can support vendors to be independent and successful in what they're trying to do.
And that's what this is all about, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
helping, giving people a hand up, I think was the phrase I saw when looking at The Big Issue. And as many people, we all know the street vendors that are there, but I say we really try. The opportunity today is to sort of also link it in with how the mobile world helps. And we used to essentially with cash, and everyone would pay with a few pounds, and then we had the pandemic, and cash became something that we sort of disappeared almost overnight. And the old phrase "cash is king" is no longer true. And how did that impact your Big Issue vendors?
So we were starting to explore helping vendors take card payments before the pandemic, and it was done on a much smaller scale at that point. And that was recognizing the trend that we were seeing, where fewer people are carrying cash on them, and it meant that sales for vendors were reporting back to us that they were having fewer sales of the magazine. So a way to combat that was to look at mobile card readers and using mobile technology to help vendors take card payments. The pandemic itself really was a threat for the Big Issue, because obviously our business model with the magazine is that people can go and sell it on the street. Obviously, if certainly the first lockdown, that was impossible, and vendors were just not able to be out and about. So we actually spent a lot of time supporting vendors through that initial 6 months. And then, as you said, people returning back after the pandemic, there were lots of things, and you'll see the sort of article with Dave on our website, which you've referenced as we've been talking about setting this up. Dave really clearly highlights that actually there's these kind of COVID interventions that have changed people's behaviours. So fewer people are carrying cash because they don't want to kind of touch it, certainly immediately after the pandemic. And we got so much more used to using mobiles and internet shopping, and that's kind of what habits people have carried on with after the pandemic. So having a mechanism that vendors can use where they can take a card payment is really good. And we see an increase in the number of magazine sales that vendors are able to make if they've got card readers.
So people are actually seeing more sales because of, and would you say is that because of the convenience, or you mentioned safety and the feeling of again people sort of dirty money and things like that? And what's sort of brought
I
that in?
think it's a few things. So first of all, it removes the excuse that I don't have any cash on me, so I can't do that. Also, if you're selling a magazine on the street, you're doing something legitimately within your local community. So having a mechanism like a mobile card reader that somebody can use to pay for it actually reinforces that you're there legitimately and you're not begging or you're not kind of, doing anything else. So it really helps give kind of a sense of purpose as well to what the vendor is doing on the street, and it sort of really legitimizes what they're doing. And giving people options. We all like options when we're purchasing things. We all want to have an option to pay by cash or by card, depending on what's most convenient for us. And that's reflected in what vendors are seeing. They're seeing, kind of up to a 40% increase on the numbers of magazines that they're selling. So that's fantastic. It puts more money in the vendors' pockets.
And I mean, just to be clear as well, you said it's cards, but also people can pay with their mobile phones. I mean, the technology, as you say, it gives people lots and lots of options. It's your
Yeah.
credit card, your mobile phone. I think we've got Apple, Google, Samsung Pay, all these lots of different ways to do it. And so I just. Yeah, I'll go back to that point. You said it was almost a complete threat to the big issue, not being able to accept that money. So mobile has stepped in.
Yeah, so being able to use mobile technology to support that has really helped the big issue to evolve so that it's keeping up with how people's shopping behaviours have evolved following the COVID pandemic. And I think that's really important to us because there is a wider social purpose that being a big issue vendor has, not only for the individual, but also for the community that they're selling in. So being able to support people who've sold the magazine, often for long periods of time, to re-engage with that community and to be there. They have regulars, there are conversations that they're having with the members of the public, and that mobile technology helps facilitate that in that way.
Just that human element I found fascinating because, as you say, there was people. Dave, as you mentioned earlier, I was reading his blog and it said it was an incentive to come out, and he really missed that opportunity to engage with his customers and customers back who used to sort of like to see him there on the morning on the way to work or wherever they were going to, and that sort of, I think sometimes we forget there's that interaction between the vendors and like Dave and the sort of the general person on the street.
Yeah, and I think that's what most people who know about the big issue as members of the public, that's the bit that they recognise is their interaction with their local vendor and that relationship that they have with their local vendor. And that is it's a two-way benefit. It's obviously a benefit for the vendor because, they've got people saying hello, talking to them and having conversations. But we hear feedback from members of the public inquiring about a vendor if they haven't seen them for some time, and that's out of a sense of care for the individual, for the person, rather than sort of anything else. So actually being able to continue that and pick that up again after the pandemic has been really important, I think, for both sets of people.
And what happens with the money that they generate? I was really fascinated to see the Davis example. Closest to me was he's trying to do an art business. He's trying to sell his art, and he was really hopeful that because of having the opportunity to mobilize the increase in sales, that gives him more opportunity. So it's not just the sort of the homelessness aspect and finding accommodation. It's more than that. It's about the education. It's about the opportunities to take on your own things. So please do tell me more.
Yeah, so being able to support vendors to use kind of mobile cashless payments has a really huge impact in lots of different ways. So Dave is a really lovely example of being able to use that income to expand his interests and his selling of art. So when you make a payment on a card reader with a big issue vendor, that payment goes into the vendor's bank account. It doesn't come to the big issue. And just as in the same way as if you were paying by cash, the cash would go to the vendor. The vendor has already purchased the magazines from us, so they've already done their initial outlay and expenditure for the week in terms of buying their magazines. So the income that they earn from that is their income to, as with any other self-employed individual. So supporting people who may not have a bank account yet to set one up so that they can take cashless payments has been really helpful because that opens the doors to so many other things like, as you said, accessing housing, being able to pay your utility bills using direct debits and things like that, things that we might take for granted, but actually are quite big steps for somebody who's on the outskirts of society or has not felt confident enough to engage in those processes. The other thing it really allows us to do is if somebody's got a smartphone that they're taking cashless payments with, whether that's a card or a mobile payment, as you said, we can then spend some time helping them to use that to access other internet services. So we've had vendors using it to kind of do job searches and get other forms of employment that they eventually will move on into. We've also had vendors using it to manage their finances in terms of welfare benefits like child benefit that they might receive for, and being able to manage that online rather than going into the job centre. And all of those things that kind of support you as a person within society today are all moving to kind of online first. So to be able to access them using mobile technology, using things that you can do when you're out and about, actually mean that vendors are then much more connected with their local community, but also with wider society. So we're starting to break down those social exclusion barriers for them as well.
Well, and that digital inclusion point is really important. It's something Mobile UK has been working with recently, was to report on digital inclusion. And one of the areas that we try to remind people is that there are many people out there who rely solely on their mobile for access to the rest of the world. And I think, homeless particularly, that they're not going to have broadband. They don't have a home. And I think it's a very, very important part and a growing part of society. And again, this it's coming from yourself. It's really interesting to hear that, because sometimes mobile connectivity is overlooked in the sort of digital inclusion debate.
Oh, I would agree completely. And I think the other thing to remember is that when we talk about homeless people, we're talking about people who are rough sleeping, but we're also talking about people who are kind of sleeping on friends' sofas or, in really insecure housing. So they're often moving around quite a lot. And, so they don't have that opportunity, as you said, to kind of have a fixed internet connection into a dwelling. So that can be really useful. I think the other thing is if you're working selling the Big Issue magazine, you're out and about for quite long periods of time in the day. So having that access to mobile technology is incredibly useful just to run your life, if that makes sense. Keeping in touch with people, using kind of social media and messaging apps and things like that. And a lot of the vendors that we're working with are comfortable with using mobile communication in that way, but don't necessarily think about how they can use their mobile data to do other things like managing banking, managing, kind of utilities, managing applications in that way. So that's where we can come in, and we offer a couple of, we call them connect sessions, but they're basically digital skills coaching sessions. So we take whatever the device is that the vendor has, and we pick something that they're interested in. So we have an example where we helped one vendor in Birmingham who's really into music. We helped them to set up a Spotify account and access music that was then they were able to take with them. And that's really helped them in terms of managing their mental health and their well-being. But it's also meant that they suddenly then feel more confident with the other things that their mobile can do. So they're now using it in terms of managing bank accounts and things like that. So sometimes it's small, unconnected steps, but they all come together to mean that somebody is using mobile technology in order to be better connected with what they need to.
And it's the opportunities this provides, which I think is what I'm really inspired by. I'm talking to you here, and there seems almost like a really interesting entrepreneurial stream that seems to be growing out of people that didn't necessarily have much, and now through what you're doing and the ability to do what they are, they're growing that and actually becoming really successful in their own right.
Yeah, and that is the aim. I mean, the aim is to kind of use entrepreneurial skills and to develop those with vendors so that they can move on with their lives and move forward. And that's going to mean different things to different people. Not every vendor is going to be as talented as Dave at art and want to kind of sell artwork in that way. But each have their own, everybody has their own talents and interests that they want to explore. And I think what our partnerships with kind of O2 and the data bank and other organizations across the mobile technology sector really help us do is help people to tap into those and explore them in a way that is really helpful to them.
Wow. And another aspect I was quite keen to sort of, these are vulnerable people on the streets, and the benefit of not having to have that cash on them, because, some people, attracted to sort of the cash that's there, and people get attacked because of that. But having mobile cashless payments means you haven't actually physically got any cash. Does that have an impact on making people feel safer on the streets?
I think with time it does. Our experience with moving people or encouraging people to take cashless payments has been a sense of trust in that the money does actually exist. There is something quite tangible about holding coins and paper notes in your hand. But you're quite right. If somebody's had a really successful day or week, then it can put them in a very vulnerable position in terms of, potential muggings and things if they're walking around with cash on. So this is a really key part of how we talk to people about why they might want to go cashless, in terms of your money is safe and it's there in a bank account that you can access. Um, One of the other bits of work that we will do with vendors as well is helping them to think about budgets as well. Because obviously, if you've got money in a bank account, you need to be able to manage it effectively so that you're not using unauthorized overdrafts and things like that. But not everybody needs that. But again, it opens up so many doors and conversations that just kind of help people become more independent and more kind of resilient in their lives going forward.
Well, I generally, I find this extremely fascinating, because there's a whole world that opens up, and it's like you say, some things that most people take for granted are sort of, really help people get on where they may not have otherwise. And I just thought, so we've spoken about sort of the mobile elements of today. I wondered if the big issue, what's it thinking about for the future, and how can you utilize these technologies to go further and to help more in terms of the social enterprise that you're doing.
So we're really interested in looking at how we can use mobile technology or work with other people to use mobile technology in a couple of ways. I think one of the key ones is how people access information about what they need. A lot of what we do on the front line, as you can hear, is guiding people into using different things. So, how can we use that mobile technology to share that information with people, not just through text messages, but through kind of apps and things like that. How can we create something in that way? So that would be one way. The other way is, are there other income generation routes that we can help vendors to access that uses mobile technology? Is this, and we're sort of exploring that to see whether that would be another way for people to earn additional legitimate income. And certainly our colleagues in Big Issue Recruit are using the internet to advertise roles and with online applications and things. So there's obviously a route there to help people access employment and that wraparound support that goes with what Big Issue Recruit offer as well. So there's lots of kind of different options there, and it's quite an interesting and exciting time to be thinking about those things.
Certainly, no, and it certainly sounds like it. And I think what I've learned most is today is that mobile it really is a sort of foundation. It's not nice to have anymore. It's a necessity in many ways, and across all gamuts of society. Now, we are doing a challenge ourselves. We're calling it Live Better Connected. The idea of this is to really build perceptions and understandings about mobile. I think for most people, it's very much an invisible signal until your mobile doesn't work, but actually there's the physical infrastructure behind it, and there's everyone it can help. And I think digital inclusion is a big part of that. Part of that is the How Connected Are You challenge. Now, I think we said to you, we were going to ask you, have you taken the challenge, and have you taken it, and what was the result?
I have taken the challenge. I underestimated how many mobile devices or how much mobile technology I use in my day to day. I think I selected the really small category of up to four, and it came out with 12 in the end. But that was mainly the headphones that I didn't think about, and the things that are connected, like your watch and things that are connected to your mobile or your laptop and stuff
So
like
three
that.
times more connected than even you thought yourself.
Yeah, and I just it made me realize that there are I'm using more things than perhaps I give it credit for. In my head, it was my laptop, my mobile phone, and maybe the smart TV and a couple of other things. But yeah, so that was a real surprise. But yeah, I think that just highlights, as you said earlier, how integral having access to both the hardware, the handset or the tablet or laptop is, but also the other side of it is actually having access to the data to be able to use it as part of a mobile technology. And those, when we are working with vendors, you can see the difference that makes for people as they grow, as they get the devices and the data, but then also growing confidence in using them.
Brilliant. Well, for anyone else who would like to take that challenge, it is available on our website. It's called How Connected Are You? And I hope everyone who does take it, it will give you an idea of how actually connected you are. And generally, we are finding, as with Penny, people are more connected than they think. Well, firstly, Penny, I mean, this has been a fascinating discussion, and thank you very much. We've really enjoyed learning about what the Big Issue does and your vendors as well. For those of you who are listening to this series, please don't forget to subscribe. We're even on Google Podcasts and iTunes and SoundCloud now, and on YouTube. We hope that you will do that. And again, thank you so much. And I hope to see you in our next podcast. And thank you, Penny.
Thank you very much.